Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm Christina Barr, your host, and today we're going to be talking about something that people have been asking of me, especially as I kind of grow my channel and the trolls kind of try to come on and dunk things like, well, if Republicans aren't racist, then why aren't more Black people Republicans? And they do this at the same time that they criticize Republican Black people if they are Republicans. So it's just like a circle of death and deception. But I'm going to really break through those talking points and go ahead and ask the question, even though generally it's trolls who ask, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it. But really quickly, before we jump into it, I ask that you would go to blacktnews.com. Obviously, maybe not right now unless you open up another browser, because I do want you to watch this, to go check out articles that I've written, go see where I am on other platforms. I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook. I did start a Rumble. I'm on Instagram. Instagram is just my full name, Christina L, I guess middle initial, then Bar. But I'm on Black Tea News is also on Instagram. So I'm on pretty much a lot of the socials, the main ones. But also you can go to the website to look at different merchandise that we have. We got this cool goat t-shirt, and also you can get it in a hoodie. You can also get this denounce white supremacy, defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of things that Joe Biden has done that are racist. You can check that out. Or here's one: I voted for President Trump, and all I got was historic peace deals, border security, ICE is destroyed, etc. And on this lousy T-shirt. This one would be good for if you're another young Black conservative, or if you're or anyone who they try to paint as a victim, women, Hispanics, Asians, is their flavor of the month, I guess, for the Democrats. You can go ahead and get one of those shirts. And we have other things, and we'll keep having things all the time. So please go ahead and check out the merchandise we have. And also, if you would like to support, you can go ahead and but you can see that there's a scrolling bar right there. You can do it through PayPal, you can do it through Cash App. And why do I ask or bring that up? Because some people, want to support. And so I want to obviously give you that opportunity to do so. But, costs to stream, it costs to build the site. And then also like to travel and do more things with blacktnews.com. So please, if you would be so inclined, I appreciate all that you guys do. So let's jump into what the topic of the day is. So why... my trolls have usually asked of me, if Republicans aren't racist, then why aren't more minorities Republican? But though they do it at the same time that they say Republicans, if you're a minority and you decide to be a Republican, then you're some kind of coon, you're some kind of traitor, which I get that all the time, which people feel awful, I guess, for it, but I just clap back. I don't waste I won't say waste energy, because I do enjoy a clap back here and there. Those of you who follow me know that, but I do not waste any sort of emotional distress on them, I guess. If you're going to call me a coon, I already did a video about this. I'm going to call you a racist, because other people have the sort of agency to make rational decisions with their beliefs, but when it comes to Black people, you feel that you need to put them in a box. So I think it's a really dishonest argument, but I'm going to go ahead and entertain it, because there are reasons why African Americans vote Democrat, and to the displeasure of Republicans, because obviously, like in my state of Michigan, you're just overrun in like cities of Detroit, right? And so we're at a real dilemma where it's like, if turnout is over 50%, Republicans are probably going to have a bad day. And if it's under 50%, then Republicans are probably going to have a good day, because Republicans are going to be the base ones who usually go out and vote. And you have to really sort of convince, I guess, a lot of Democrats, and some of them are low information voters, who will go out and they're just Democrat because of kind of patterns, and they'll go out and they'll vote straight party and do whatever. So how do you break through? Because it's not fair and it's not right if Republicans are just, and I'm not saying all Republicans, but there are some strategic ones that sort of bank on turnout. And that's no way to move forward through the future. So this is handy information to have. So handy today. I even wrote notes. My sister was like, you do talking points. I'm like, not normally, but I thought, I wanted to have my stuff together today. So that's what I decided to do. So I think there's three main reasons why Black people vote Democrat. And the first one is perceived heritage, this perceived marriage between like politics and the culture / your Blackness, and the perceived policies. Now, why do I say perceived instead of just saying the heritage, your Blackness, and policies? Because all of those are things that they use from some kind of manipulation or talking points, or how they've gone through the culture, or how they frame their argument. But it's not really so. So people have a perceived heritage of being Democrats with their families. And I say perceived heritage because obviously Black people, when they got the right to vote and all that other stuff, they were Republicans. Some of their first like senators and congressmen. We already had a Black Speaker of the House. Did you know that? Like right off the bat, when people were able to vote and they passed, 13th Amendment and so on, and Civil War's over, things started happening very fast for Black people. And the abolitionists were Republicans. The Republican Party was founded to, stop slavery in one of our locations up in Michigan at the Rock in Jackson. There's a rock there that's like, this is where the Republican Party was founded to, destroy slavery. I don't remember the exact phrasing. If Lindley's watching somewhere, she's probably like, she doesn't remember the exact phrasing, but because she sure would know it off the top of her head. But the Republican Party was founded to get rid of slavery. That's why they came together. There were the people who were Democrats who were against slavery, or the Whigs who were against slavery. Like those people, like, they broke off and then they joined the Republican Party. So the perceived heritage of Black Americans is the Republican Party. Now they're like, oh, there was a big switch and the values have changed. That's not true. The big switch is a lie. Yes, there's someone like Strom Thurmond who switched parties. But you won't find like there was an astronomical number of Democrats who fought against civil rights and things who just decided to switch Republicans, like, with like a crazy must have like, see here, we're going to take over the country. Like there was like a plot to rephrase things and make that the argument, but that's not how things work. And people say, well, there's a Southern strategy. If there was, it didn't work. If it was, it didn't work. And really, Black people started changing a lot with like the New Deal and stuff, parties, and but even so, those policies and stuff didn't work out in a positive manner. You can find all kinds of articles about how those overall things didn't help Black people in the end. There's an article about the Cato Institute and other places where they kind of detail how Black Americans thought they were getting something, but it didn't really turn out well for them. But they started trading kind of their loyalty for things, which a lot of people do today. It's not an exclusively a Black thing, but that's where that started to go. And of course, the public opinion, because Democrats have been in the institutions a while trying to frame and slowly take over things, started changing narratives. And then the final, like really nail in the coffin that started the big exodus, of course, was Goldwater. So so there's a perceived heritage, and you'll find with a lot of families, they'll be like, well, my dad's a Democrat, my mom's a Democrat. If you come up to me, like some people get so offended, like you assume she's a Democrat because she's Black, like in my comments or something. And it's like, well, that's not really totally fair when they go after those kinds of trolls, because statistically it is likely that you see a Black person that they're going to be Democrat. I mean, you could just ask them before you assume things, and it's always better not to assume things. But statistically, I guess there's a good chance that you're going to be right. But just because your family is a Democrat and those before you, obviously doesn't mean that you shouldn't think for yourself and expand your horizons. There's a friend of ours. He married a young Black woman, and so her dad worked in the the plant and it's like the union and stuff, and so they would send home the thing on who you vote for, and of course they would vote Democrat. He'd give it to his wife, she'd vote the way that the union paper said, and the daughters would vote the way the parents said. And so he's like, you can, like, I want you to make your own decisions, and I don't want you to be like a Republican just because I'm a Republican, but just go ahead and maybe do your own research. So they went to one of those sites where you just kind of plug in what you believe. And so she took a test and it was like, oh, guess what? She should be voting for Donald Trump. And so she had her mom do it. And guess what? Guess what? The mom should be voting for Donald Trump. And so there was a sister, and she was like, I'm not taking that test because that test said y'all that y'all should vote for Donald Trump. And she was afraid to take the test because she was afraid to find out that she might actually be conservative or might actually be, her morals might actually align with actually voting for Donald Trump. Now, she was a little more kind of like left wing active, so I don't even know if that's the case. But it's sad and it's funny that people would be even afraid to find out where they actually stand because there's just this perceived heritage and perceived culture. Now, with my family, I've been Republican I've said in this video, one video that I did, that I've been a Republican for as long as I've been interested in politics, which has been like 20 years. And so people are like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm 31, but as long as I've been interested, it's been like in middle school. And so, but there was an origin, like a exodus, I guess, for my family, my immediate family anyway. My oldest sister, she went to Pontiac Central. And she had a teacher that was just kind of going through a list of, this is what, Republicans are for, this is what Democrats are for, or conservatives or liberals or whatever. And so they took the test, and lo and behold, most of the kids found out that they were actually conservative. But the African-American community, everyone might not always be following the word of God, but we're all very religious and have those roots. And so there's a lot of traditional values that we have that are just plainly, conservative. So a lot of those kids found out that they were actually conservative. My sister was just like, I'm a conservative. So she went home and told dad. She's like, Dad, I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. He's like, what? And she's like, Dad, you're a Republican too. And so he, to my knowledge, accepted it pretty, easy because he already, disliked certain things that the other side was doing. And so it felt more comfortable. And from then he was just like, you get in the car, Rush Limbaugh's on, raising Rush babies. And he was very excited when I worked at Michigan Republican Party. He'd call and be like, what are you doing? What are you working on today? I'm like, I work in comms and I literally cannot tell you everything that happens, right? He's like, okay, but just like, he would call me like when I got to work, he would call me during lunch, and he would call me like on my way home. So he was just really, really into it. A lot of people who like know me know, like, my sisters and in our family, like, they know my dad, they love my dad. He's really into it. So, but there was an exodus for my family, and that spun, people like around me and stuff. But most people, you would ask them, are you Democrat or and if they are a Republican, they would assume that it is it was some kind of sudden shift. Because even like people who follow me, and I'm getting a little bit of a following on TikTok, but people just kind of assume that, like, well, sometimes they'll be like, welcome, and I'm like, I've been here. I've been here for a minute. But people assume there's some kind of recent exodus, like, I guess, was Brexit and so on, but some of us have been here for a minute, and I've been here for a minute. But yeah, there was an exodus, but there is a perceived heritage. So some people are doing it out of, my family was this way, I'm this way. And you don't see a lot of people who are just going to turn from their family unless there's some kind of, I don't know, a little bit of rebellious streak usually, or there's got to be some kind of way that they're introduced to different values to kind of question everything they've been taught and everything they believe. And where would you learn that? Because culture is not going to make you question that. College isn't going to make you question that. It's so interesting. I was watching some TikToks of these young Black women who shifted, and basically one of them was like, they went to California to live their like liberal dream and stuff. And then when lockdown started happening and they saw kind of how oppressive things were and how poorly the state was run, they're like, I went from being liberal as such and such, they curse to being conservative as such and such. Like, they're totally in in totally against like big government and all this other stuff because they saw just recent events. And there were so many people in the comments that was like the same. And so you did see, Trump's numbers uptick in like Hispanic and the vote and in the black vote. And I think some of that was like stuff that he did prior to that. But I think the more tighter you grip onto the people, the more you're going to see some slip through your fingers. And so it's a perceived heritage. So let me go on to point two. This perceived marriage between politics and culture and people's blackness. Now, if you're not a minority, this is probably going to be really hard to grasp, but people are really into their ethnic identity. And you might say, we're all Americans, we're all this. It's like, dude, I understand that, but it is what it is. And at some point, especially if you're some kind of strategist, especially if you want to do door knocking or outreach or something, you don't have to like it. You don't even have to understand it, but you have to just accept that it is what it is. So Pew Research, this isn't quite fitted the right way, so it's going to overlap not quite in the way that I want, but Pew Research did this study some time ago. And as you can see, or maybe you can't see because I don't know how small that is up on your screen, but so white Americans, they identify with their color being part of their identity, like a net 15%. And so you see black Americans, it's way up there. It's way up there. So you may not, if you're a white person and you're trying to grasp the difference between like how black people perceive themselves and accept their blackness, as opposed to you and your whiteness, which some of you guys do like hold on to your cultural identities. Like you might not go around saying I'm proud to be white, but you might be saying, I have this Italian heritage, I have this Polish heritage. And I've talked about this in another video on why I'm proud to be a Black American. And it centers a lot around the background of, Black Americans being really a great underdog in history and their perseverance through everything that they've gone through. Like I have a totally different perception than someone who might be like a Ta-Nehisi Coates or a Nicole Hannah-Jones or a Black Lives Matter activist. I saw this crazy video just like an hour or two ago of a Black Lives Matter activist saying that they don't care if anyone riots or steals or anything. And that she actually said she was for it. And she kept repeating she is for that stuff because she said that even if they burn down like everything, it would not equate to and pay for all the stuff that was done to Black Americans. And I got to do a video on this later or TikTok or something and just say, they don't owe you nothing. Nobody owes you nothing, lady. You didn't go through that pain. Your ancestors did, and you have zero right to keep appropriating off the pain of your ancestors, sister. So just shut up, buck up, and live your life right unless you want like mass incarceration of all these dummies going around stealing crap. You are doing Black people no favors. So that's what I'm going to say. Perhaps a little bit more eloquent than that, but still with some heat. But anyway, I have a different perception of why I call myself a Black American, why I'm proud to be a Black American. And if you can't, and I don't think it's really that different than people who, I guess, take pride in cultures in other sort of ways. But as far as like Blackness being an identity, you may not be able to grasp hold of it. But what you do have to understand is a lot of minorities do find that really kind of central to their identity. So the Democrats have done a pretty good job of parenting that Blackness with being a Democrat, with those, and not even like necessarily the values, it's just being a Democrat, because they're not always honest about the things that they're going to push it for. And so how are they able to accomplish this? Well, Democrats they've gone in the institutions, and now they're really pushing the social justice thing. But this has been an idea that's been in the institutions, I think, for a while. So you have it in academia, you have it in Hollywood, you have it in and it used to be like just a college thing, but they're really like up in the schools, like even like elementary, like Black Lives Matter, like they have a curriculum. And I have a link to that in a article that I wrote, like Black Lives Matters versus Christians. By the way, if you have a TikTok, I'm going to do a live about that tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. And I did write an article about that. If you just kind of want the short version, you can just go read the article on blacktnews.com. But they do have curriculum that they want to push to people, and then you have people like pushing stuff like white fragility, which is inspiring like people to do like Coca-Cola, to do the less white, be less white sort of stuff. Like we're really in a dangerous place. But and so now we have corporations weighing in into what they perceive to be the fight against racism, like fighting against the Georgia law, saying they'll pull out, even though there isn't anything racist about the Georgia law. Personally, I think it's way too lax. In Michigan, we have a voting day. You get to the polls and you vote that day. Like I think polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But you got to get there and go that day. Now we have like any reason absentee, which in my opinion, I don't really think they needed to pass because it was pretty easy to vote absentee anyway. I'm not a fan of voting absentee. I just don't like the idea of my ballot just being up there somewhere. And I know that's paranoid, but I would just rather just vote on the day personally. But there's people who's been voting absentee pretty much no problem, but they just passed a bunch of stuff so they can have like same day registration, all this kind of crazy stuff that now they're trying to pass a voter ID law that you have to have like your ID, but and that's good, but that's like there were other things in our 2018 election that should have been stopped that wasn't stopped, and so we're kind of in a mess. But anyway, you have these corporations weighing in, and it's really getting pressure from like the president and all these other people so they won't donate to Republicans anymore. So they and Jake Tapper said that, well, that like Major League Baseball, they had to pull out. You don't understand, they had to pull out because if they didn't, they would get the players and the coaches, they would get all kinds of questions from the press until their game, whether or not they were going to pull out. So instead of just having that be a drawn out thing, they just went ahead and decided to just, bite the bullet and go ahead and call it a quits. And so and people were pointing out like, okay, you're a journalist, Jake. Why would you people keep bothering these players who are there to play baseball? That's why they're there. Why would you and your colleagues keep bothering them about pulling out and weighing if they don't weigh in on this issue? And I don't know if he said it in a like sincere kind of like, guys, it's this like, but you're contributing to this toxic culture and then covering it up. Like you committed the murder and then you hid the body, man. That's what it's like, what they're doing. So you have these corporations weighing in. Of course, the media 100% has a full on monopoly. One reason why people hated Rush Limbaugh so much is because media wasn't like how it is today when you just, of course, obviously go online to find podcasts or videos and so on. Or there's all these different channels you can go to if Fox isn't right wing enough, or you can go to OWN or Newsmax or something. I mean, people have so many options today, but before it wasn't like that. There's just like a couple traditional channels, and he like brought to life AM radio and stuff. It was like just a dead channel. So he basically created conservative talk, period. And that's why a lot of people really hate him. Now there's things that he says that are controversial, and you could say it's because he said this comment and this comment, but the reason why you know about this comment, this comment and that comment is because people like Media Matters were trying to shut him down forever because of what he was and what he offered to the world. And so the media watched his like programs nonstop to get clips to try to tear him down and stuff. So they don't want you to have options, and there's more options today, but obviously there's a monopoly. And you can talk about how many viewers Tucker Carlson has and how he's like got more than his other competitors on other networks, on MSNBC, CNN, and so on. But when you still combine them together, there's still going to be a bit larger number, and there's still people who are only actually watching 2, 4, and 7 for their news. So who don't even bother with like the cable news. So we're still at a disadvantage. That's one reason why I do what I do, and I appreciate everyone who helps me as I grow to do what I do. But the Democrats, they have that institution, and they have Hollywood, and they've been planting seeds for a long time. They use media to change culture, to kind of to indoctrinate. And we're seeing it now. And I say the last kind of bastion where people can fight is the church. And we have so many like progressive woke pastors and musicians and stuff. Sometimes I cannot believe the nuttiness that Lecrae says. And he's a pretty big Christian rapper, but to kind of push a woke ideology, and they phrased it like it's some kind of super compassionate thing, but it's just like really bad policy. Like Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, and I did a video about this, it's on my page, you can look at it. And after the shooting of Dante Wright, she said, you know, they do this was intentional, and they have inherent bias, and they can't be reformed, we just need to get rid of the police. And so there's other activists. This is a kooky opinion, but other activists share this opinion. And so what we know, even though, and this is in TV shows, like there was one TV show with the guy who played Tom Keene in Blacklist is in it. He's a star. I think that's on NBC. New Amsterdam, that's what it's called. And they had an episode, and they're like, oh, these cops are here to protect us. We need these cops here to protect us because there was some kind of incident. And someone told this other ER doctor, like, no, we don't want the cops here. But what about the homeless people and the Black people and the Hispanic people and the trans people who will be scared to come here and get the help they need because there are cops? And so by the end of the episode, they got rid of the cops. They even made a joke like, we defunded the police, and they like hired bouncers to like handle people who go ape in the ER to intimidate people. And I'm like, this is such a dangerous, ridiculous rhetoric. People like TV shows pushing that garbage, and Representative Rashida Tlaib, there's a lot of Black people that she represents in the 13th district. And let me tell you, we call the police. We call the police, and I want them there in a timely manner. So and if the police aren't there to solve crime, to stop crime, to to protect us when we're in danger, because at the same time, remember, these people don't want us to have guns, you're going to have a lot of minorities who end up dead. It's just idiotic, radical policies that hurt people. So they frame it like it's compassionate and do all these things, but it's really actually really hurtful. So, but they have this really down to a science where they've married the identity of Blackness and being Democrat. And so you get people like, I'm a Republican, and they'll say, well, you're a coon, or you're an Uncle Tom, or people will even call me Candace Owens now. Candace Owens is a racial slur, guys. They'll call you an Uncle Ruckus if you step out of line with what they believe or how they perceive that a Black person should be. Or and they do this with other races, like Nicole Hannah-Jones, when the numbers came out, like how many Hispanics voted for Trump. She's like, well, I got to do an article saying why these Cubans aren't really people of color. And so they're already ready to chip you off. And she also made a comment like, there's a difference between being Black like ethnically or being like the real Black. And she'd say the real Black. Again, I can't remember the exact phrase, but people are like, what do you mean? And she's like, everyone knows what I mean. And someone in the comments was like, I'm a Black person, I don't know what you mean. And she's like, yes, you do. And she just would not explain her point. But her point is, if you don't think like me, I'm not going to consider you a Black person. So and it's very hostile. It's very aggressively racist. But this is something that they've been doing a long time, and they'll keep doing. So at the beginning, I stressed that people want to know, why if Republicans aren't racist, then how come there aren't more Black people involved in the Republican Party? But at the same time, you'll shame people if it turns out that they are Republican. There's a couple of videos that I saw of like Black Republicans, and they're playing Disturbia, and its headline like, once you realize that you're the conservatives start making sense. And in the beginning of Disturbia is like, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? And the camera kind of spins like, I'm having this odd revelation. Oh my gosh, I'm not actually a Democrat. What these people make sense. But it's funny because some people have to have that revelation. But if you have that revelation, people are going to come for you. So they've done a really good job being militant to try to keep that Blackness identity tied to being Democrat. And that's another reason. So the same people who will, accuse GOP of being racist for that reason are going to go ahead and make sure that you're still staying in their party. So it's a trap, but I decided to answer these questions and go ahead and give this talk because because I think it's important for people to know. So the third point is perceived policies. Now, why do I say perceived policies rather than just policies? Because they be lying out here. They be lying out here. So you got something like Obamacare, right? And so Obama goes around saying, we're gonna, you're gonna keep your doctor and you're gonna keep your plan if you like your plan. And so he's like campaigning hard on this, right? And so what happened? He ends up winning lie of the year because it was a lie. It wasn't real. It wasn't true. People weren't able to not everybody was able to keep their health care. Not everyone was able to keep their doctor. And they knew that. They knew that from jump. So, and also the guy who was the architect of Obamacare, and this was one of those scandals, those things that people don't say existed and happened during the Obama age. So he was at a lecture, I think at college or something, just kind of bragging, like, if people would have really known what we were up to and what we were doing and said, like, hey, healthy people are going to have to pay into this so they can take care and pay for sick people. like explaining it like some kind of pyramid scheme. And he's like, they would have never voted for this. They would have never voted for this bill had they had known. And so the press did report on that a little bit, and it was a thing, but I'm sure not everybody knows of this. And it's not something that's pressed, but they could not pitch it to you as a real, like, this is what we're going to do, and say, hey, I think this is going to be for the betterment of people, but you're going to have to do this. And they had to deceive people to get it passed. So it's not even like that they have good policies that they believe will necessarily help people, that like they have the policies that they believe they need to gain power or whatnot, but it's not to help people, like this bill that they're trying to pass with the election laws and stuff to kind of like take over federal elections. Like it'll like help so many people. It's not to help people. They like the outcome that they had. And they want to make sure that they keep having particular outcome. Like they talk about Republicans and the Georgia law, and they've made this false narrative that's cost the state of Georgia and counties where they voted for Biden hundreds of millions of dollars, but they still push this lie. And they're willing to push lies like that over a law that I think is super generous to voters, actually, in order to. And the reason why they do stuff like that, and the reason why they're going to crack down and push against other states that are trying to keep in measures in place for election laws, is to frame the narrative that states, they shouldn't be trusted with scheduling, with the polling, with all these things that they would normally do, and it needs to be something that's done at a federal level. And states should never surrender their rights to the federal government. If you have a representative that advocates for the state losing power to surrender it to the federal government, you should not vote for those people ever again. Our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, went to go argue for this on behalf of Congress. She should be absolutely voted out. She's doing a bad job in a bunch of other areas, but she should be voted out, even if it was solely for this. And people have asked, like, well, why would these states be pushing these laws now for like voter ID and so on? Isn't the timing suspect? Isn't this timing suspect for what the Democrats are trying to do in the House to pass that bill? Why isn't that suspect? But I'll answer the question. It's because we had a lot of different changes in this past election that opened up a lot of people to voting in a different way that we've never done before. So what is wrong with putting in safeguards? Because if you don't have safeguards, then you're going to open up yourself to fraud. And that's just the absolute truth. I'm not trying to say here that and get off the rails, or with people saying like, oh, you're trying to say this is based on the lie that the election was stolen. I'm not even trying to make that argument. I'm just saying, though a lot of people watching, we've had that discussion and stuff, but I'm not trying to say that's the case. And I'm definitely don't think in Georgia that's why they pushed this bill, because they stood up to Trump and said, no, we did our election the right way and there's not fraud here. The reason why they're doing it is because they want to prevent future fraud, because people will take advantage of cracks in the door if they can. In retail, we're taught, if you want to stop people from doing crime and stealing stuff, you have to provide good customer service and make sure that you don't leave people alone in the aisles, because most people will do it if there's opportunity. Well, not most people, but people who may be on the fence do it. There's some people who go to a place and they're like there to steal, but there's some people who maybe think about it and it's like, okay, no one's watching me. Can I get away with this? And then they try it. And some people try it and then they get addicted to it. Like, especially a lot of young people who get into that. But if you're around and you're like, hey, what's up? And then they kind of see like, oh, they almost got caught or something, and they feel embarrassed, is like kind in that shame and that revelation of, oh gosh, I could probably go to jail. Like, that might deter them from a life of crime forever. So it was our job to make sure that we are always going up to customers to deter them from any type of situation like that. Now, did you go up accusing people of anything, but you just don't want to present them with the opportunity. So you don't want to present people with an opportunity to try to do something in order to steal an election. And don't tell me people wouldn't be motivated to do it, because when you paint your other side as literally Hitler, why wouldn't you have the motive to steal an election? And another reason why it's important, I'm going to get back to like the topic, but for states to have different rules and rights. Like, I don't really like the Georgia bill myself, but Georgia has the right to make those kind of decisions. I think it should be that open or whatever, but they can make those decisions. But when Trump was kind of, before he won, and he was going around saying rigged the election, which I think it was mostly about the media rigging the election was his case. Obama would just be like, that's stupid. Like, you can't rig the American election. It's too diverse. We do too many different things across different states. You can't just rig the election like that. Now, of course, when Trump won, people changed their tune. I don't think maybe Barack so much, but like, of course, Hillary and other like people in positions of power, like, it's a stolen election, and they, came up with a Russia hoax and all this other stuff. But before then, they were prepping it when they thought Hillary's going to win. They're like, of course, you can't steal an election like that. That's stupid. But they did find a way to basically make the elections kind of like singular in fashion with the mail-out ballots and stuff like that. So it was a rapid change for the country, and maybe in a day we'll all be ready for it years down the line or something. But you can't tell me that all the elections were run well, went smoothly, the counting went smoothly, even if you don't think there's any sort of fraud or shenanigans and stuff like that. You can't tell me it went smooth. You can't tell me like stopping counting in the middle of the night just when your one candidate is winning, and then all of a sudden there's change. Like, that breeds like trust. Like, you just, even if there wasn't anything wrong, why would you open the door for that sort of distrust to be, sowed into the American people? So people make changes. It's really not about voter suppression or whatever. But back to the policies, perceived policies. Like, Joe Biden, like, one of the first things he does is to X out the Keystone Pipeline. And so there were clips of him being honest, like, especially when he was in the primary, he had to compete with other people who were way more green than he was. He would say, like, we're going to get rid of this stuff. And then when it became clear that he was, the nominee, had to go against Trump, like, the media and stuff were running cover for him. Like, he would never ban fracking and all this other stuff. And they would find all this way to kind of twist the truth or whatever. But what did he do? He cut off Keystone, and they're looking into getting rid of more pipelines or stopping more stuff. And what they asked Jen Psaki, they're just kind of like, oh, he always wanted to do this. It's whatever. Like, they're like, make the better decisions. Like, we'll have different jobs for them. And Pete Buttigieg's like, we'll have different jobs for them. We want people to keep having good paying jobs. It's like, okay, but when will those jobs be ready? Someday. It's like, how about you let them keep working at their good paying jobs so they can take care of their families? And if those other jobs are so good and they pay so well and the energy is so much better and efficient, it'll price out and force people out of what they're doing, and they'll just move. They'll just move. Like, people do not work on VCRs anymore, really, right? Because there's other industries that came in and replaced those things. So we just have, they push all these ideas that are just not like commonsensical, that have no grounds in reality. Like the minimum wage, which, by the way, like, they talk about systemic racism and all this other stuff. the minimum wage, and there's a good article by Evie Magazine that went into the history of this, but it has a history in eugenics. And at the late 18th in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Harvard was really into eugenics, and they kind of backed away from it a little bit, or being so openly, blatantly for it. Once like the Nazis came into power, they're like, we don't want people to think that, we're associated with them. But they kept Katrina, give me tissue. So they kind of dialed things down a little bit, but excuse me. But they still pushed policies, and so they were into eugenics, and they Australia did a minimum wage to purposely to X out Chinese people. And so these Harvard professors and stuff even praise them. So their goal was 100% to get low skilled workers out of the workforce, because they believe low skilled workers are people who basically didn't deserve to make a living. They wanted to limit the population of minorities and the disabled, people who they thought they were dumb. And so as they tried to do this superior race. So eugenics, minimum wage has a history of disadvantaging minorities, and there's data to support that. There's a history, obviously, of it. I don't think everyone who pushes it today obviously has some sort of evil agenda, but it ignores history, and it ignores facts. There's only, when you have jobs and you only make so much money, there's only so much that you can pay people, and they know it would. And there's people who are smart enough to know that it would ruin small businesses, and and it would price out low skilled workers, and it's a mess. But they push it like it's some big moral thing, and people are like, hey, I want to get paid more, of course, so yeah, I'll be for that. But they don't, they're kind of dishonest about what will happen as a result. So it's perceived compassion, but in real world application, there's a lot of people who are going to be disadvantaged and priced out of the market and not even be able to have a job. And then also it goes against common sense concepts like, let's say you work in retail and you've worked your way up to $15 an hour. When let's say they hire someone else and they're making $15 an hour because they felt like whatever pay you had when you came in here, that was low stuff. So we're going to pay them $15 an hour. Some kid, and you got all this experience. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about some kid coming in and having $15 an hour, the same that you're making? Let me tell you, because I know people in this real world situation, people don't like it. And you could say, well, then the company just needs to pay them more money. There's only so much that you're willing to pay someone in a low skilled job that anyone could come in and do. And let me tell you, the real world application of this situation is that companies will start making life difficult until that person retires, quits, or whatever, because they don't want to have to pay that person who's been there a long time an extraordinary amount of money when someone else could come in and do their job. And not all companies will maybe be like that if they have like a good, balance of the family life and they value their employees to a degree that maybe they'd want to do that. But I'm just telling you, that's what happens. Like, that is the real world application of it. Like, minimum wage, it just denies human nature. It just totally denies human nature. And if they could just think about it a little bit harder, they would be able to acknowledge that. And so I want to bring up something that the Black Federation president said, a good friend of mine, Deontay Johnson. And he said, Republicans can say facts don't care about your feelings, quoting Ben Shapiro like how many times they want to. But the truth of the matter is that feelings go to the polls all the time. And people won't know how much you want to help them or how much you care until they know that you genuinely want to help them. And minorities will vote for their feelings all the time. I think people do that in general, but minorities particularly will do it and have done it in the past. And like I said earlier, the reason why people started voting for the New Deal, even though they had all this history with the Republican Party, they're like, well, they have stuff, so we're gonna give them a try because they're giving us stuff. And it didn't even work out the way that they needed it to or wanted it to. So the truth is that you do have to realize that people are voting off of feelings. And that's why the Democrats do such they have such a focus on framing their things and not necessarily being honest, but framing it things like this is like an emotional plea, like the Equality Act. Like, we want to make sure that these people aren't denied health care. We want to make sure that no one fires them or kicks them out of a you know a rental property because they're trans. That, like, nobody wants those things to happen. But we don't think it would be right if you decide to discriminate against churches or you start disrespecting their stances on their faith, or that you start enacting maybe hate speech laws, or if there's a woman's shelter where women have been abused by men and you let in men, and it's supposed to be a segregated place on the terms of gender, and you bring in a man who might be like a hulkling figure, but he has a dress on and a wig and says, "I'm a woman, so let me in." Not by the hairs on your chin, sir. Like, no, sir. Like, so they phrase it a certain way, like it's compassionate, when there's just like nonsensical applications. Like, do you really think it's compassionate for all these people who might be confused with their identity to push on them to have this culture of where they might be confused? So and you frame like providers like there's some kind of monster if they don't want to do surgeries, and you change the culture. Like, you can't even even maybe talk people out of it. Like, doctors kind of have to go in with the perception of they have gender dysphoria, as opposed to maybe saying maybe they don't, and working out other problems. So we're just creating a lot of issues that aren't at the end going to help people, but are going to really suppress people. Like, it's a problem. Like, people, like, it's just respectful to respect people's pronouns and say their pronouns. Like, it's respectful for you to acknowledge that I don't want to do that. And like, I can call you by your name. You change your name, legal name, sure, I can call you Caitlin if you want, sir. But I'm still going to respect my religion where it says thou shalt not lie. So, and you may not like that, but respect would be acknowledging that I feel and I see the world a certain way and you feel a certain way, and we're going to just kind of coexist right now. But I don't have to. Respect isn't me needing to bow to your emotions. And I guess that goes back to the facts don't care about your feelings things, but I do care. But I just did a TikTok about this. People say that conservatives aren't compassionate because they don't want to pay for certain things like your healthcare and so on. But I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but we need to frame it a different way, because my ideas and my policies, they are compassionate. But it's going to require an explanation as to why. And Republicans, their biggest issue has been communication. And I'll jump back to there in a second. But I just want to finish up on this topic first of perceived policies. The Democrats, they always say that they want to help, and they always pretty much lie about what they will stand for. Like, Democrats, like, we don't want to take your guns. You guys are so silly. You guys are so silly with your conspiracy theories. It's like, okay, but you guys say that Heller was a wrong decision. And Heller, they're like, Scalise was wrong about Heller. It's like, okay, well, Heller says that if you have these guns that are like in largely using the population, you can't just get rid of a common gun. So, like, that's wrong. It's like, so you believe that we should just be able to get rid of people's like ARs and other stuff like that. Okay. And the reason why most people don't like ARs is really cosmetic. If you go to a gun show or something like that, or like Steven Crowder did a video one time when he had like this booth, and he's like, which guns do you think should be banned or whatever? And they point to guns that might be deadlier, but they were like, they had some wood in them, so they didn't look quite as scary as an AR-15, but they might have been much more deadlier weapons. So a lot of people who argue against guns don't know a lot about guns in data and how they operate, or how you buy one. Like, you can't go to a gun show and there's no gun show loophole where you're not going to have a background check. That's just malarkey. Even like in the President Biden said that the other day, and he even got dinged before Pinocchio. No, he got rated mostly false. And to be rated mostly false and be a Democrat, that means you are like that counter shouldn't have been here. It should have been like down to the center of the earth. Like that was a big lie that they couldn't even cover for more than that. And another thing that Democrats they're not honest about how absolutely radical they are. Like a lot of with this gender ideology and stuff like that. Do you think Biden how things imagine how things would have went and Biden would have went around saying, "Yeah, I'm going to sign on the debate stage. I'm going to sign an executive order that says that boys should be able to go in girls' locker rooms." Like if you go talk to a lot of black people about that, they're like they might say they're for Biden, but like that's not cool. Or they didn't like Trump, rather. They didn't like Trump, and so they voted the way they voted. But they're like, oh gosh, that's not cool. People aren't okay with that. But they know those aren't the things. And it might be on their website that most people might not go to. But they're not going to go out there and just campaign on that, especially when it's down, when they're not in a primary. So, and another example, good example, is the packing of the courts. So once this became a big conversation after Ginsburg died, they talked about packing the courts. And so Biden just refused to like answer those questions, to talk about it. And a lot of, senators and stuff tried to dodge it. But Biden, he flat out told people, I'm not going to answer this question because it'll distract. And it'll distract about things that are important. Like, this is a totally important thing that we're talking about that you don't want to talk about, sir. It's a totally important thing. But he told America, he told the press, I don't want to get off topic with the things I want to talk about. Like, it'll distract. Why will it distract? Because it's an important story. It's an important story. It's an important worldview, just totally tipping the balance of the Supreme Court for your needs. They're supposed to be balanced and you want to just knock it off kilter. It's an important thing, but he knew he had enough sense to know that he could not engage in how he might have really thought about that. And he may feel a different way, but he may know that he has to lean a certain way because of where his party is, and he does not have like any spine left because it's probably deteriorated from his old age. I don't know. Y'all know he's not all there. But he at least had enough sense not to talk about it. Even giving that answer was like, so should have been a red flag, but people still voted for him and the press still covered for him. And another thing, and this is like the last example and I'll move on, was the Hunter Biden story in the laptop. And so people are going around saying it's Russian disinformation, and Facebook and Twitter, they were locking out, I don't know how much Facebook did it, but Twitter locked out the New York Post, which is the oldest newspaper in the country, mind you, who broke the story. And there was reporters who claimed that they had a laptop. They're like, I'll send it to you, Jake Tapper. I'll send it to other people, which, they didn't get back on that offer. And people just tried to pretend like it wasn't real. And even though his team like wasn't denying it, like they weren't like, we're not saying, like they would just kind of like going roundabout ways, but also kind of admit that and verify things in it. But now obviously we know, especially since there was a picture of him of Hunter Biden with two prostitutes, in a room, and then there's a Squirtle just kind of staring there, smiling a little bit. Like if you're a Pokemon fan and went on Twitter, like, oh, why is Squirtle trending? You were like, oh no, my eyes. So obviously this was his laptop, and he wrote a tell-all, but there's stuff he obviously left out, and he's just kind of pretending like, oh, it could be, who knows? Like, dude, like you signed like to leave it there. And people might say, but that doesn't make sense. Like, look, his story makes a lot more sense when you realize and accept the fact he's a crackhead. So, and now people will say like, well, he wasn't running for president. He's not the president. Why does the story matter? And they'll pretend, and they'll say that with a straight face and just pretend that if roles weren't reversed and if it wasn't like Donnie Jr.'s laptop, that they wouldn't have been acting crazy. Okay. So anyway, they're not honest about their policies, about the things that they push. They have agendas, but they won't tell you what they are up front. Like Nancy Pelosi, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in the bill. The COVID relief bill, the rescue plan or the CARES Act or whatever it's called. And they're like, oh, we're gonna lift up people out of poverty, which I've heard people quote that, and I'm like, wow, dude, you really drank the Kool-Aid. And I'm like, how broke are you if you believe that stimulus check lifted you out of poverty, man? And so they say those things, but like even money that was toward education, you're like, okay, if this is for COVID relief, why isn't some of the money even being spent until the next couple of years? And why are you paying off states' debts? And why are you giving stuff to other countries? Like there's so many things wrong with the bill that doesn't even go toward COVID relief. And now they have the infrastructure package that they're trying to push, and it's like everything is infrastructure. Like Kristen Gillibrand like wrote a ridiculous tweet just like including like everything is women's healthcare is infrastructure, trans rights are infrastructure. Like I don't remember exactly what she put, but it became like a thing like on Twitter, but among like conservatives where they just like they would list the most ridiculous things and say this is infrastructure, because they know that they're only going to include like maybe like I don't know, 10%, 20% at the most of things that are related to infrastructure while they're doing takeovers, like invalidating states that are right to work states, for example. So it's just about federal control and trying to jam through what they can, but they cannot be honest with the American people because they might wise up. They might wise up and start to push back. So that brings me away from the points and onto what can we do about it, right? So so where have conservatives failed mostly as far as reaching out and why there's this big discrepancy with minorities and with with Republicans. And so I think most people would just kind of jump toward it's about outreach. And I had a friend, and that's what most people will say. Um, but I had a friend who made the point like, okay, well, Hispanics still vote more for Republicans than black people do, and they don't reach out to them any more than they do black people. They might do that less. And so there's got to be some other reasons. And so Hispanic people, they are tied to their identity, but not as quite as black people. So I think there's maybe some difference in makeup in there as well. And then there's like a lot of people who've like fled from like countries where there's socialism and other stuff like that, and that reads into like suspicion of some of these Democrat policies that sound very eerily similar to the things that they fled. And so that plays a part as well as far as the discrepancy. But I would say that the main reason why like we're at such a disadvantage and discrepancy is really communication. And some of that isn't Republicans' fault because they don't have a grasp of the media, who at this point is just like the DNC pushing out like talking points and so on, that the Democrats want. Oh gosh, if you don't know, CNN got busted. Like their media director, I think technical director is the right term. He got busted, and I don't know how Project Veritas gets all these people. It's like I saw a meme that was like a box of like that was like tilted up, and there's like a couple of drinks, and in the box said like Project Veritas, and so like it was just a trap, like you get 2 or 3 drinks and they can just get you to spill your guts. And so he admitted that basically like CNN, it was their job or was their plan or was their goal or was their hope or whatever to unseat Donald Trump, and they accomplished their goal. Which that's not breaking news, but it's very, very terrible that like someone at a news organization would admit that. And they also admitted like they're kind of creating a story with the Matt Getz thing. So because he can hold up bills and he's very conservative, so they basically want to stop him. If you're not aware of his stories, there was like some kind of sex trafficking allegation, and in him saying he's being with underage girls. I haven't really mentioned it because there's not like a lot of stuff that's come out that's made sense about it, and there's certainly not any evidence out right now about it and stuff. If he's been like flying out underage girls and sleeping with them, I would assume there's going to be some proof like flight logs or something that people will have eventually that will come out. And if it's true, it'll come out and I will condemn that sort of behavior. But people are trying to really destroy him before that sort of evidence comes out. But now we know that CNN and probably other networks, of course, are creating and pushing that sort of story because they want a particular result. So and then he had the Hunter Biden story being suppressed, and the tech giants shutting them out. And you can't even like post a meme without being fact checked, right? If you post a meme that says something like the price of gas is different today than it was before Trump was president, there'll be a little note on there. It'll be like misleading, and it'll say it's not Joe Biden's fault that gas prices are higher. It's like, well, first of all, did my You might not even have a comment that's like saying alleging that it is different because of Joe Biden or he was the reason. You're just noting that it's different, and they got to put in there like, please don't blame Biden. Well, guess what? Gas prices was high when it was Obama Biden. They went down under Trump, and now guess what? Now they're going back up, and we might be like averaging $3 in the nation by summer. So I do think there's a pattern, but you can fact check it and do your misleading stuff all you want. But some people are going to catch on, man. But the point is that all these institutions do muddle the message, and they don't want conservatives to be able to break through. But that doesn't mean that Republicans always do a good job of handling their message. So I'm going to go back to this post I did about a conversation I had about compassion, because actually there's this big liberal on TikTok who was like, conservatives have no empathy. They actually hate America, and they have no compassion because they're like, oh, I don't want to pay for your healthcare. Oh, I don't want to pay for your college. And so I replied, I did a funny, like, sarcastic, stitch to her, like, which is a reply with some of her video on it. And then I did another video talking about conservatism is compassionate, or how they perceive our compassion or our stances on it and stuff. But like, our stake with personal responsibility isn't just you learn how to take care of yourself, and if you don't take care of yourself, then you're screwed. That's not how a lot of conservatives operate. A lot of conservatives, they tithe in their church. Their church does community work. They may volunteer. They may work in battered woman shelters. They may work at pregnancy health crisis centers. They adopt. My family is big into doing missions. And that's something that we do. And we raise money for it. We give our money for it. We go out there and we do work. So while liberals might say it's compassionate to open our borders and let anyone who wants to come in, which there are lots of like technical reasons and financial reasons and why you just don't overburden our system like that. And you're going to make a great country not quite as great if people come in and there's like a welfare kind of system involved, and people are coming for benefits rather like merit kind of base. But that's like a whole different kind of conversation. But they're like, just let people in, just let people in, just let people in. My idea of compassion is actually going to those countries where people are distressed and they're fleeing and trying to make life better for those people there so they can change the culture of everything around them. It's like, everybody fleeing to America isn't going to help the rest of the world. And there was a lot of Christians arguing, I think in 2017 or 2018 or whatever, when the Trump like border story broke out, and they're framing it like, oh, the kids in cages and stuff, even though Obama and Biden built those cages, which I can't believe they got away with that and got elected. But and I heard Christians saying, and I think like even like Romney and other people were kind of like, no, it was Kasich. It was John Kasich. It was just kind of like, we got to be compassionate about the situation. And it's like, okay, but why are you framing it like it's not like it's that like America has to make up for your Christian duty? Your Christian duty is to go to the highways and the byways and to preach the gospel to all the nations. It's not America's job to do the work that you don't want to do. So you get up and you go and you take care of that yourself. But it's not cool for these people to break our laws, especially because I've gone to other countries on the mission field and met people. Even like one person was a civilian spy in Philippines who was watching us to make sure we weren't kidnapped by terrorists. And one reason why they do stuff like that is to kind of get in good with the embassy and stuff, because they want to get to America. So they want to do things to help themselves get here. And so you think about people like that who help to keep us safe, who want to get here, and you think about people who cut the line. It's not fair to them. So and I also talked a little bit about minimum wage. Why is it compassionate for you to ruin someone's business because you want to be paid $15 an hour? And you'll hear liberals, and I've even heard like some congressmen, Democrat congressmen say now that if your business can't afford to pay $15 an hour, maybe it doesn't deserve to exist. That's insane. And how do you get to make that determination? Who made you the moral police that you were allowed to make this determination which businesses deserve to survive? Especially it like capitalism will determine who deserves to survive, because if people want to participate, people want to buy your products and they will buy them, and you'll make revenue and all this other stuff. But if you're putting in legislation that's going to artificially cripple people into having to go out of business, how dare you make those moral decisions and pretend to be moral and compassionate? It's just not fair to small business, and they know it hurts small business, but they've kind of given the argument like, well, you just don't deserve to exist. How dare you? Or people who want Medicare for all, they know that in order to get something like that, they're going to have to destroy healthcare, like private healthcare, and they're like, well, maybe we should just do that and just get rid of your private health insurance. I don't care if you like it. You can't possibly like it as much as you think, because you can't really go to the doctor anytime you want. And it's like, okay, but what about people I know? Like I have a relative, they have the best healthcare you can have, and they have used it to take care of their disabled daughter. So you're going to say that they shouldn't have private healthcare so they can get on Medicare? How is that compassion? So we really need to frame our arguments differently. Like we have like, I mean, people like Rush broke through with like into the market where there was none, and you have like people like Ben Shapiro and other people being very popular, but at the same time, but someone like Ben Shapiro is like attack, like facts, destroy, and I think he has fun doing that, obviously, but I don't think that's always meant to be his approach. And I think maybe he's kind of dialed it back a bit, but I think at the same time you need people like that who's gonna spit those facts like that, but also at the same time who are going to kind of make the more compassionate sort of approach. But you have to still keep your arguments. There's some people who believe that we should kind of start moving toward the center. It's like, no, are you right or are you wrong? Are your values going to work, or are they not going to work? And if they're right because they work, then you need to make your case. And there's not enough people making the case. And so my final point is, because I've named the biggest problem is really communication, and one big communication error was like in the Trump tax cuts, which again, you can blame the media, but even the New York Times did like a story on it where majority of Americans got a tax cut, but the amount of people who actually realized they got one was like it was a staggering difference. So I like to point that out to liberals who think that Trump's tax cuts didn't affect them, which like, no, you probably got something and benefited from it, but you just didn't understand it, and the media convinced you that you didn't. So communication has been a big failure as far as like Republicans, and I think conservatives overall. But and it's not like it's like you're climbing up a hill with both arms tied behind your back. I get that, but it's still something you have to fight through, and it's important to fight on. And that's one reason why I'm here doing what I'm doing. And you got to get out there and you got to make that case too, and find an intelligent way to really interpret that. We can't always go for the dunk. I do like the dunk and to spit out my facts and to like cut people up like with a surgical tool and stuff like that. But we do need to explain how our ideas will help people live better lives, will help people get better jobs, and why personal responsibility is so important, in how personal responsibility is a way to fight against dependency. How can we do that? And the final thing I want to talk about is outreach. And there's some people who, especially like in big levers of power, who are like consultants and stuff, who think it's a waste of time. And sometimes they just want to dump a little bit of money here and there. And they think that they can just bang out white numbers and win elections. And that's just not going to be the case for a lot of places, especially as people move and cities keep getting bigger. And like there's some states down south that saw what happened in Georgia, and they're like in Alabama and other places where they're just like scared. I think Alabama is going to have a big backlash with all this dumb stuff that liberals have been pushing. And you'll see probably a big, I don't know, red sweep in maybe 2022. I'm guessing, I'm predicting, but who knows? That's still a ways away in politic world. But people are going to run into problems if they don't start trying to frame things differently. And so if you have that mentality of we're just going to dump money and see what sticks, it's not a good strategy. It's just not a good strategy. But one thing that you can do, you need to have conversations with people. And obviously you can't just buy ads. And obviously you can't just go on Fox and say, I did my part. Because only a certain sector of people are watching Fox and you're not reaching everyone else. You can't just go on the major news networks because some people aren't watching that. Sometimes they're just watching 247, like the local news. And sometimes you got to send out mailers and stuff, maybe even before an election starts. So you got to go to stuff and campaign before it hits that crucial campaign season. People have to know you. People have to get to know you. People have to trust you to some degree if they're going to vote for you. So if you're a candidate, you have to, and this is one thing I've really, really stressed in the past to candidates who want to run, especially in hard districts, you have to campaign like for the whole entire time, not just when it's crucial, when it's, in October or September or when, like, you got to do that as soon as you're sure that you're running. You got to go out there and you got to meet people, and they have to know, even if you're from another side of the aisle, that you can convey your message and what you believe is going to help them. And if you convey it, there's going to be some people who will never listen to you. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be some people who never decide to listen, but there are going to be enough people that you can reach that will listen. But you have to, and it's going to take time, but you have to be the one who's going to make that starting conversation. I'll tell this story. So when Black Panther came out, my sister was the chair, not the chair. She was the head of urban engagement and women engagement at the RNC. So I was the coalition's vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party. I was like, I want to have this event, and I didn't think I'd get the Michigan Republican Party to do it. So I was just like, we're gonna have the RNC do it. So she's like, okay. So she got them to pay for it, and so they rented out a movie theater the night that Black Panther came out. Free popcorn, free pop. And we're gonna have a business panel before it, and then we're gonna have the movie. So, and we're gonna talk about the Trump tax cuts, and we're gonna talk about some other good Republican values, and have some local business oriented people there to explain those things, and some local GOP people, and I was on the panel too. And we did not advertise it as a Republican event at all. So people arrived and they're like, this is a Republican event. We're like, yeah. And so it's not like they're going to leave because they had a free movie ticket to watch Black Panther. So they came in and they enjoyed the discussion. One of the first things that we did was, we asked the room, like, how many of you have got more money back on your check since the Trump tax cuts? And people raised their hand. And people who weren't maybe aware of it were able to look around and see, oh my gosh, this is like impacting people around me, like in the real world. And the room was like probably majority either Dem or independent, but there were a lot of Republicans in the room, because obviously friends of friends know that it was taking place, but there's a lot of people who weren't on our side in the room. And so I was aware of some people who were Democrats. I was kind of watching them throughout the whole thing. So I was waiting for the Q&A, and I was like geared up, right? Not to like do a Ben Shapiro destroys kind of thing, but I was just readying myself if there was any kind of conflict. So a woman raised her hand who I knew was Democrat, and she stood up and she's like, okay, what's wrong with y'all Republicans? And what are y'all going to do? Because there's information that I'm not getting to take care of me and my family. And so I thought it was such a great question, because at the end of the day, people want to take care of their families and their friends and their communities and the people around them. And they're going to go with what they think will best help them accomplish their goals. So if Republicans aren't willing to make that case, then they're going to keep falling for the lies of the other side. And so basically my answer was, Republicans just need to do better. And that's all that I could say. Now, and I said that's one reason why we decided to have an event like this, to have this conversation, to have this message. But like we talked about the SBA and money they're giving out and how they could apply, and how to take care of your business and all this other stuff. But that's, and what kind of benefits there were that people were seeing from the Trump tax cuts. And so they were grateful to have that information, and hopefully they went on their own journey, and they, would take their emails and information, and hopefully they're like, red pilled and stuff. But if we don't do stuff like that to reach out, we're not going to see the numbers change. Like, sure, you'll see people who are frustrated from like lockdown stuff, like in California, and who might be frustrated because they're saying that boys have to go in girls' locker room, and people trampling on religious liberty and stuff. But at the same time, that they're going to also be working to radicalize people to change perception on stuff. Like, think about in 2008 in California when they had gay marriage on the ballot. And you're like, if gay marriage is going to pass anywhere, it's going to be in California, right? Well, there was, an unprecedented amount of black people went out there to go vote for, the first black president. And guess what? They're like, I'm not down with this gay marriage stuff. And they voted that down in California. And I was like, wow, in California? And I think the whole country probably went, in California? And so, and granted, there's a lot of Republicans in California, but but in those large, like densely populated areas, there's obviously more Democrats. And that's why it always goes blue, and it always goes blue very fast on election night. And so, there's even some districts where Republicans don't even run. It's just Democrats against Democrats. So, once that happened, did you notice that like TV like drastically started changing? Like, there's a vast number of like, it's not representative of like the gay population that there is, or trans population, all this other stuff, to the amount of like stuff that we see on TV, or the characters and stuff that people have. Now, you may be saying it's a good thing, and you could feel it as a good thing, but I'm just letting you know that this stuff is they do strategic things to try and change the culture. So while you might pick up people who are sick of where the culture is going and be concerned about that, at the same time they're working to emotionally kind of manipulate people to be at a different sect of accepting things. And they might even not always like really be there, but there's a large swath of people in America who are afraid to voice their opinion. And I forget the statistic, but it's a high amount of people, Republicans and Democrats, who are afraid to even voice their opinion, and who will go along with the gender pronouns and all this other stuff. Like, New York Times put out like an article listing not just they, them, zer, and like even animal stuff and fantastical creatures. And I'm not even joking. Like, it's a real thing. I mean, it's not a real thing. It's a real thing that they do, but it's not like a real thing. It's just really male and female. But but they keep pushing, and some people are afraid to say anything to the contrary. Like, it's free speech. Like, technically you could say anything that you want to in America. I mean, you might suffer consequences in it, but we do have freedom of speech. But do we really, at application, have free speech when people are afraid to be able to say what they want to say? Because they might be canceled, because they might be fired, because it face all kinds of repercussions. So it's just something to think about. But we need to do the outreach to people. And if we are afraid to do that, then we're not going to see the change that we want, and we're just going to lose elections. And we could get on a trend where it just permanently is loss after loss. And then you'll have people who are like, well, we need to not be so center. We need to not be so right, and we need to appeal. But if you start becoming less of if you're more like the other option, and you're less like what you represent, what makes you think that they're not just going to stick with their option that they have? They're already there. So why are you trying to move to kind of appeal to someone who's already on the other side of the aisle? Like, if they want a different option, they're going to pick you because they want a different option. You don't go and if you're if someone wants juice and you're a Coke, you don't make yourself more like the other thing. You're just different. It's okay to be different, but people need the options. But you trying to change who you are, is it going to be constructive to the needs of the party? It's just not. And you're going to lose your base, and you're going to fracture the party. And Republicans need to really grapple with who they are and what they stand for, and they need to fight for it. They just need to make a better messaging around it, and you need to convey your message. So and that's and I read from Deontay Johnson and some stuff from the Black Federation president, and what he said was true about the fact. And I wrote on that post, I'm like, empathy means nothing if you don't have any sort of like intelligence behind it. Because if you don't have intelligence behind it, then there's a lot of people who get manipulated. And but he was right on all the stuff that he was saying. And we do need to make that case and make it seem like we care, but we can't do that by appealing to people's delusions about the world on a various means of topics, but we just have to convey why our stances are compassionate. So we have a long road ahead of us. And I will say this in closing, that there are some groups that will be like minority based that want just money and don't want to do the work. So you got to be careful of those kind of predators. There's like one group I was talking to, and I'm just like, they're like, yeah, we started this. I'm just like, oh, y'all going to Atlanta? And they're like, nobody paid us. I was like, I mean, I understand you want to like check and stuff, but I'm like, you got to kind of prove yourself before you just expect everybody to start throwing money at you, right? So I'm like, okay. And then there's some groups out there that, like, if you don't like pay into them, they'll go around saying like, oh, they don't care about black, people, black business, all this other stuff. Kind of what P Diddy's doing right now, right? Talking about General Motors, like, yeah, they invested in us, but they're not giving us more money. It's like, so you're going to imply that maybe they're racist because you don't appeal to the mass swath of the audience that they're trying to reach, and they won't just give you more money because you're black. Like, you have to do a better job of reaching the wide variety of the audience that they want, and you just being a niche. If you're a niche audience and market, then you're just going to get niche money. And niche money can be good, but it's not better than like long brand wide distribution money. So, but and then sometimes you'll get parties and groups or whatever that will they don't do the work, and they might buy into some kind of consulting firm or whatever, say, see, look, we tried. It's like, no, you just want it to look like you tried, but you didn't do the groundwork. So if people want to do outreach, it has to be a long-term investment. It has to be a long-term plan, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take communication, and people have to be dedicated to the task. And if you're like someone who just wants to throw money into something and see if it works, that meme of that girl, that video, it was just a little girl and she's just throwing money out of the window. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing if you don't want to take the time to do the actual work. But I've pretty much said all my talking points, so I'm going to go ahead and start to close it out. Thank you guys for listening. Please go ahead and share. I'm going to just, I guess, go through the comments really quick to see if there's anything that's interesting I want to address. Really appreciate you guys. If you guys would like to donate to blacktnews.com, of course, you could do so at the bottom where it says paypal.me/Christina Elbar, or Cash App at Ninja Dust Pub. If you're like, why is it Ninja Dust Pub? That's my Cash App that's Ninja Dust Publishing is the name of my publishing company. And I write, here's the children's book I wrote. It has a lot of conservative values and stuff in there. If you want to get that for your kids or grandkids or neighbors or something, you go to ninjadustpublishing.com and check that out. The book behind me, Slay Your Fear, I actually wrote that last year during the pandemic because people were like just obviously living in fear. So I wanted to write something about that, address that, because that there was so many people who were wouldn't leave the house and not just like they were afraid themselves. It transformed them into like angry, hostile people. And there's a difference between being wise and then living in fear and letting it change you and corrupt you. So I address certain things like that. So you can pick that up. But these things are all available on Amazon. I guess until Amazon, they kicking people off, y'all. But right now they are available on Amazon. And that's the only place you can get it right now. So you got to support me on Amazon. So you can check that out, and make sure that you're going to blacktnews.com, that you're reading articles, that you're putting in your email on the email list. Bookmark my site, because who knows how long I'll be able to be on Facebook and all these other platforms. But there's a comment: when our emotions are high, our intelligence is low. That is absolutely true. Danny Anderson from YouTube. Thanks for watching. Okay, but thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna call it a quits today. And if you do have a TikTok, I will be on TikTok later tonight at 10 o'clock, 10 Eastern time. And I will be talking about how Christians were duped by Black Lives Matter. And I wrote an article about this on blacktnews.com if you kind of want to jump the line and see what I wrote there. But I'll be talking about this a little bit more at length tonight. So if you want to check me out there, you guys can do that there. And thank you for listening. I told my sister, I'm like, I only want to talk for an hour. And she's like, lies. I said, I only want to. I don't know how long I'm going to go. That's my goal. But we're going into almost an hour and 30. But I thank you guys for watching, and God bless.